The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it Mondays here. It is Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by Currency. For all of your equipment financing needs, go Currency. For the first couple minutes of the show, it is Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark joining you here as Chris Schmidt somewhere in North Lincoln as he makes his way over towards the studio. He was watching his son play some baseball. The game went to extra innings and wrapped up roughly 15 minutes ago. I know he packed up and hopped in the car, and he's moving over here shortly, but luckily, Connor Clark, and with the entire week of Hail Varsity shows this week, if I remember correctly. So Connor and Elijah taking you through the first couple minutes of the show today, as we've got plenty to get into today. Obviously, to start, we're waiting for Schmidty's arrival. The over-under for me has been set at 410. I'm not sure if you want to take over-under on that. I was thinking he was probably going to be speeding just a little bit, and assuming he doesn't get pulled over, I was thinking under 410, but Is that a fine line?
I'm gonna take the over, because I think traffic is gonna play a factor. I don't know how many people are at this baseball game, obviously, but got to pack up the stuff. Maybe got to wait for a couple cars to get out of the way. Yep. Maybe get stuck at a couple of lights, because 70th is a busy street.
And 4 o'clock, that traffic does start hitting.
Yeah.
And for those listening in podcast form, just to lay it out for you, if you're not listening live, the show starts at 4:06 exactly every single day. 4:06 is whenever we are on the air. It is currently, the clock just hit 4:08. So to be under 4:10, we're about 2 minutes away from that mark. We will see what happens.
I will be sweating looking at the clock.
Mm-hmm. But your update for the show today is, again, you can always chime in with the show. Send Chris an email, chris@hailvarsity.com, or you can find us all on Twitter at Schmidt_radio for Chris, at Herbal Essences for me, Elijah Herbel, and at C_Clark_27 for the man across the glass from me, Connor Clark. You can also give us a call, 402-489-1240. That's 402-489-1240. Or for our listeners across the state, give us a call, 800-825-5865. We'll get you on the air. We'll discuss what you want to discuss, as we're going to be discussing the commitment of Preston Taumua today, 4-star. We'll just call him an offensive lineman. Some services have him as an interior offensive lineman. Some have him as an offensive tackle. He's kind of on that borderline when you look at 6'4", maybe a kid that still's got an inch left to grow in him, 6'5". Maybe he can reach during his time at college. That's still pretty borderline for an offensive tackle. I think you can get by in college football as an offensive tackle of that size. I think you wonder about projectability at the next level, getting up to NFL in a 6'4", maybe 6'5" frame. That's on the smaller side of guys that play offensive tackle in the NFL nowadays. So it kind of depends which recruiting service you go to, where he's going to be listed. But he committed last night about 1 a.m. Central Time, and let's just lay it out here for the people listening at home. I'm a dedicated worker. I love talking about the Huskers.
Employee of the year.
And I was staying up. I was like, you know what? I could fall asleep. I could set an alarm, and I could wake up for this commitment, or I could flip on a movie and just stay up late on a Sunday night. And, I didn't have really any responsibilities this morning, so I was going to turn my ringer on in case anybody called me. And I got usually if any notifications go off my phone, it will wake me up, so I can check my notifications. I can sleep in if I so choose to do so. And I was like, I'm going to stay up till 1 a.m. I'm going to watch this commitment live. I'm going to break the news on Twitter. I'm going to be that guy.
The over just hit, by the way.
Over just hit, and Schmidty is not yet here. So for those keeping track at home, if you bet the over, you're wrong. But anyway, back to my story. Around 10, we'll call it 10 or so, I flip on the new Puss in Boots: The Last Wish on Netflix. I've watched the first little bit of it, and I was like, because somebody posted it in full on Twitter one day. It got taken down for copyright eventually, but I caught the first little bit of it, and I was into it. So whenever it got posted up on Netflix, I was like, I'm going to go finish this movie. I liked what I saw to begin with, and I did. I finished that movie, ended up being around 11:30, just a little before 11:45. The movie finished up. Shut off Netflix. I'm like, all right, what am I going to do for the next hour and 20 minutes while I wait for this commitment? And my plan was I was going to flip on the PS5. I was going to play some FIFA.
There you go.
And I was going to get ready for this commitment. Before I had the chance to do that, though, a cat hops up on my lap. And you know how cats are. They're nice and warm whenever they're sitting on your lap. and I was relaxed, and my eyes started feeling tired. I've been out umpiring baseball all day, and I fall asleep on the couch in my living room. My phone dies at some point in the middle of the night. So I am not able to be woken up this morning, and I opened my eyes at like 11 a.m. this morning, confused, because that means my roommates, or this my one roommate that is home right now, made it off to work this morning, ate breakfast, made coffee, did all his morning routine, fed his cat, did all of that without waking me up somehow, goes off to work, and I wake up just in a confused state at like 11 a.m. this morning.
You needed it.
So if anyone that is listening that I am a coworker of tried to reach me this morning, I do apologize. Also, I completely missed the commitment, but I've done my preparation day. I'm ready to talk about it. Preston Taumua is in the boat. And as we kind of laid out, 6'4" offensive lineman. We hit on this on the show last week with Brady Oltmans, as well as with Charlie and with Jay, the undersized offensive lineman argument. And that's what Preston really falls into. Whenever you look at him in that 6'4" frame, he'd be a pretty average-sized interior guy. I personally am of the opinion, based on his film, his technique work for an offensive lineman at the high school level, very, very high for an offensive tackle, specifically his pass protection. His pass protection is high level for a guy. There's one rep in particular that I think of where it's a defensive end trying to come around the edge and use the long arm around the edge to keep Preston off of him. And Preston, with his size, obviously, some of those taller defensive ends with long arms are going to cause him some problems. And the one thing I saw that made me go, this guy can be an offensive tackle, as Schmidty walks in the door at 4:12 and 28 seconds. So the over has hit, but that is good timing, making it across town from Schmidty. He'll get hopped on headset here momentarily as I'll.
So do you owe me a steak and a beer for that, or no?
We didn't shake on it, so no.
I should have thought of that sooner.
Yeah, but the one rep, back to my point, that really stood out was this defensive end gets into him, gets the long arm, and Preston chops down on that arm and sends that defensive end into the dirt because his momentum or his center of gravity was all off, using Preston to kind of stay up. As soon as he chopped down the arm, it was a quick move. That defensive end goes into the dirt, and Preston, as offensive linemen do, he made sure you knew about it. He goes and lays into this guy on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
It's what you're taught to do. It's what you're expected to do, and it's that kind of nasty you want from an offensive lineman within the rules of the game, but that dude's going to feel you whenever he wins the rep.
Right.
Or you're going to feel him, I should say. So chops down on the arm, and that's the one rep that stood out to me in my mind of being like, wow, this guy can be an offensive tackle at the next level. I'm not telling you he's going to be. Whenever I look at Nebraska's recruiting class as it currently stands, they already have 3 guys who have played their entire high school careers and are really smaller than Preston as interior offensive linemen. You got 3, and that kind of stands out to me as being 2 guards and a center. Whenever you look at Landon Davidson, Jake Peters, and who's the final one forgetting about? Gibson Pyle. 3 guys that have played their entire careers as interior guys. I think they slot into that role well. Preston listed as an offensive tackle, and you wonder if behind the scenes there was that element of, we want you to play offensive tackle. The other schools might not want you to, but that's where we want you. I wonder if that's a factor, but you look at the 2 guys that Nebraska's recruiting, 2 guys that have played offensive tackle, and Preston Taumua, who's now in the boat, and the last one, Grant Bricks, another guy who's played offensive tackle. You wonder if Nebraska is trying to get a 5 across the offensive line in this recruiting class, and that's the plan they have in place for you. I'm not telling you he's going to be an offensive tackle, but where I stand right now, reading the tea leaves, I think that is where I'd lean right now, that he's going to be an offensive tackle. No expert here, that's just what I'm seeing.
Well, anytime you can get a guy, no matter what his size is, that could drive somebody into the ground after winning a rep, I mean, that's always a good sign, right? And at the end of the day, you talk about size and height and all this good stuff, and obviously you need to be big to be an offensive lineman, but if the technique and the talent is there, it's there, and I think that's the bottom line when it comes down to it, and that's what I would look at mostly. And you mentioned watching his film, his technique is fantastic. So, I mean, if you have that, and, you know, you'll hear it later from Jay Moore, too. I mean, talked about how polished he looks as well. I think that's a really, really big thing to look at. Obviously, again, size matters, but when it comes to an all-around talented offensive lineman, technique, speed, whatever, that's what I would look at first, rather than, oh, he's 6'4", not 6'6".
And let's also be clear here: 6'4" is on the smaller side of things, but for a guy
not small, though,
who is athletically superior to a lot of the other offensive linemen I've seen the film of in this class, I look at Preston in being 315 pounds and saying, from a body point of view, that guy could be closer to being ready for Big Ten play than a lot of us think. As Chris Schmidt joins the show, we welcome Schmidty in here as he made it across town. Schmidty, how you doing? How's the drive?
Drive was not great just because of traffic. I
knew it.
Trying to find some gray area so I can collect from both of you on this over-under. Now, the bad news is I left my Beat to Hell Beats headphones in the press box.
Oh.
So I'm using a headset mic to listen to you two yahoos. So, hey, no, good stuff on Taumua. We'll check in with Jay Moore here in about an hour. Charlie McBride also in 1 hour. So that's good. But no, I mean, Nebraska has done some great work. Here's what we have in front of us. You have kids that have played a lot of snaps for Nebraska. You have a year 2 with Coach Raiola. You also have really, quite honestly, a first recruiting class with Coach Raiola that he's put together, that he's consulted with. He's absolutely circled who he likes. He's consulted with Satterfield. He's talked with Rule. I think Foley's part of that conversation as well because of all of their offensive line backgrounds. And you have a chance to push pause for a second. And that is not rush any freshman or redshirt freshman into action unless they're better, unless they're deserving, unless they've beat out who's in front of them. And that's not been the case at Nebraska, sadly, for a while. I mean, you had that first year with Frost where you did have some guys that were holdovers and had plenty of experience.
You think about some guys that even got some time in the NFL with Gerald Foster being on that, Brendan Hymas being on that line.
Hymas is who I'm thinking of.
Farniak was on that line.
Farmer.
Tanner Farmer was a great center for that offensive line. And there were even Husker fans at the time who thought, man, once Frost gets things rolling, this offensive line is going to be even better. But alas, that was probably the best offensive line he put together, and it's because you had some great talent that Mike Riley was able to evaluate and bring into the boat. Like, Hymas was a guy that was a 4-year starter, started as a true freshman at Nebraska.
And that's another discussion point where, yeah, he's a kind of an Austin suburban kid where you look at Westlake, the Drew Brees area. Mm-hmm. So those kids are more maybe college ready than a lot of kids at the high school level. But Hymas is more of an exception than a rule. And we look now at Corcoran, we look now at Benhart. Those guys have had a lot of snaps. And you look at Big Teddy. He's been injury prone, but he's been at least in school or at this level for 2 years. So that wasn't necessarily the case with Benhart or Corcoran, how they were rushed in. Now, Corcoran didn't make his first start till that final Rutgers game. But there was always thoughts or talk that he'd be close. Same with Benhart. I mean, he's played a lot of football. You have this group that's presumably going to get coached up. Their best will be unleashed in an offense that will suit them. And if you're Raiola here, you've got some recruits you liked that everyone agreed upon. You still got to sign them in December, but you have those 5 kids you like. And then you have a second year together with this current crew and an offense that will have an identity, and that's to be physical, to fire off the football, and to be pretty run-based. So that's a win if you're a Nebraska fan, and we're talking offensive line. You get Taumua, and maybe the sky's the limit. I mean, Nebraska went after their share of Hawaiian kids, I think, because of Frost's connection with Mariota. But for the most part, you've got to be really sure to get a kid from that far away that they'll stick and stay. We always highlight the 2 Hawaiian kids that really made a name for themselves in Finoti and Raiola. But there's more that played for a while but maybe didn't contribute as much as their star ranking. I think 5 or 6 total Hawaiian kids in that Solich era, or just towards the beginning of the Frank era, where Nebraska was recruiting. George Darlington's going to be in studio with us tomorrow. George was the man on the ground in Hawaii for recruiting for all those years for Nebraska, so we'll talk with him a little more about that in about 24 hours. But I like how this is setting up. I like that Nebraska's got a class of 5 that they like. And I like that these kids can come in. We'll see where they are. What's their starting point? Get them developed, get them some time. And meanwhile, you still have some kids that are in the program that haven't been pressed into service. All the while, you have kids that are pretty experienced, pretty seasoned, that have been on the offensive line. Scott's a Hawaiian kid. I mean, that's a big get for Nebraska with Ben Scott at center. So it's looking well. Now, the cherry on top is if he can land bricks, because then you presumably got your 2 tackles, you've got your interior, and you figure out you've got a center because you got to have a really, really good one. That's the difference maker in that trench warfare that is Big Ten football. 489-1240, numbers to get in if you want to join us. I will recap shamelessly a thrilling victory for Cornhusker Heating and Air. A comeback victory. They were down 5-0. They won 8-7 in 9. This thing went extra. I have a baseball question for you two baseball guys. I'm a baseball dad. But what would you do? And you can talk me out of it. This isn't armchair or second guessing. I generally want to know from a strategy standpoint. Jay Moore, Charlie McBride in an hour. Hail Varsity continues. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence, and at C_Clark_27. So back from baseball, the kids won state for the JV level, the A5. That's Southwest's baseball team, Cornhusker Heating and Air. They beat Schaefer's. Lincoln East, a hell of a good ball club. And they jumped out. Southwest battled back. It was back and forth. Some just incredible plays. Some drama at the plate. Couple of nice relays by Southwest. Cut some would-be runs down. Some clutch hitting. Ty Phillips was a monster. Caleb Bolte, a solo shot for the go-ahead run. Solo shot into this win down left field line. And then Reed Pedersen came in and was all sorts of Mariano Rivera. He was big time. It was fun, happy for the kids. They're celebrating. It's off to Bennington. So we're there Friday. And if you're a baseball dad or mom or grandparent, you get it. It's fun. This time of year, they continue to play on. So here's the question for both of you, and can chime in. So it's a 1-run lead. And you have a runner at second and third. There's 2 outs. And do you walk the 2-hole hitter to get to the 3-hole hitter? Do you load the bases with 2 outs? And there was a walk that occurred, an intentional walk. And then there was a couple of close pitches that were not called strikes, really good plate discipline by the hitter. And he walked the tying run home. You get out of it, thankfully, without giving up, depending on who you're cheering for. You get out of it, and the winning run does not score, but you go extra. And it's easy to second guess, and that I'm not criticizing. I'm asking the question, what would you do? Because you're in the heart of the order anyway. There's presumably a little bit more power with the 3-hole hitter, but more contact with the 2-hole hitter, where he could slice one down the line, and with 2 out, everyone's running. So you're going to get walked off potentially. What would you do in that moment, Jim Leland? Well, Jim Leland would light another smoke. But it was pretty tense, and things worked out okay for Southwest. But I truly want to know, Elijah, put your umpire hat down and your managerial lid on. You too, Connor Clark, and the ghost of Don Zimmer with your Cubs jersey.
Okay, here's what I'll say, and I'm a guy who's seen a lot of high school.
No, that's I'm interested. I'm interested to hear.
What I'll say is that whenever you're up by 1 and you have runners on second and third, a runner on first does not matter. If that run scores, let's let's take it back. That run is not going to score because the runner on second would end the game should he score. So that runner on first does not matter. And where it really benefits you is it gives you a force at every bag.
Right. Versus
your third baseman catches a chopper, he can step on third. Your shortstop he can toss it to the second baseman at second. And if you really want backup plan, you can fire it across the diamond. And why that's an advantage is because at the high school level, let's just say they're not Ellie De La Cruz.
There's some erratic throws.
There's some erratic throws. There's some guys that, you know what, they hit it down the line to third base. It's going to be a tough play every single time just because of how they get down the line. Mm-hmm. And you're going to say, you know what, I think I have a better chance of getting you at second than I do at first throwing all the way across the diamond.
Sure.
So I'm going to load the bases personally. I'm going to load the bases, and I'm going to give my infielders a potential for easier plays.
Make it easy. Make it simple.
Because let's be clear here. Anything to the outfield, if it's not caught,
you're screwed.
It's going to end the game. That runner from second is going to score. So you're going to bank on the fact that you're either going to get a strikeout or you're going to get a ground ball from that next hitter. Because realistically, anything else either ends the game. Anything else is just going to end the game. Either ends the game in your favor or it ends the game for the other team. So I don't have a problem with loading the bases up. The problem then becomes if your pitcher can't find the strike zone and you walk in a run, that becomes the problem. But it's a question of how much do you trust your pitcher? Do you trust your pitcher to keep it in the zone, preferably keep it low, give yourself a chance at a ground ball? That's a risk I take because of the fact that at a high school level, especially when the pressure is on, it's tough to trust your infielders making a difficult throw. With the pressure on, I'd much rather them flip it to second, flip it to third, than have to make the throw all the way across the diamond. So I don't disagree with the decision at all.
Here's my question to you. Mm-hmm. How did the two runners reach?
Well, that's just it. You had, I think, a hit by pitch.
Okay.
And then the relay was so good that it was a double down the line that did not tie the game.
Okay.
That had been tested previously, and it didn't work out well.
So it's kind of like one of those Alex Gordon situations in the World Series where you go, it's 2 outs here. I don't know if he's going to be able to score from third, but we're going to hold him here because we think he's getting chopped down at the plate. That was one of the cases there. And it's a different situation because Gordon was going for an inside the park home run.
Because that tells me that you can trust your field more than you can trust your pitcher in the inning at that moment in time.
That's a good point.
I think I'm more so in agreement with loading the bases too, but because again, like even if you do walk in a run with that situation, it's tied, right? It's not over.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to tie the game there, but
you have second and third. You have an open bag.
You're force anywhere.
You just gave up I mean, it was one of those off the end of the bat, oppo field, fair by a foot.
Yeah.
It wasn't laced. It wasn't great contact. It was well placed.
I think having the option of a force anywhere is the straw that breaks the camel's back in this argument. Because, again, I agree. You watch way more high school baseball than I do. Both of you do. Mm-hmm. And can you trust somebody to make that throw across the diamond or make a tough play even if it's deep in the hole at shortstop, right? Or you could just go, hey, ground ball to third base, step on the bag. You could throw it to first. You could throw it to second. Ground ball back to the pitcher. You could even throw it home if you wanted to, if the situation's right.
The way I look at it is you've got to play with fire with their 3-hole hitter.
Exactly.
Knowing a hit could end it. And credit to Reedster. He did a hell of a job pitching and getting that final out. So no easy answer.
No.
But my take is I would have pitched to the 2-hole.
And there's one more thing to note here.
If it's professionally, I agree, yes.
Yes, if it's professionally, I agree. Because one more thing to note here at the high school level is dive into the mentality of a 16-year-old kid on the mound with the season on the line, runners on second and third. He's got first base open. That kid's going to nibble around the zone. That kid doesn't want to give up any hard contact.
He was right on the black.
Yeah, he's going to nibble. And then the worry becomes when you're trying to nibble, you're trying to hit your spots too much, your breaking ball gets away. And now it's a pass ball, and that runner gets to score from third cheaply. That's another concern I think you have in that moment of saying, you know what, if you load the bases, you got
to throw it.
You can go tell your kid, hey, we don't have the room for a base here. Don't nibble. Pitch to contact. Trust your defense. Let's get out of this. Whereas if you have that open base occupied at first, you can tell it to a pitcher, and he might still try to nibble because you don't want to be that guy that gives up a double to the gap to end the game. You're going to nibble in that situation, and again, then you're opening yourself up to the possibility of a wild pitch or a pass ball.
See, and the way things were at is if things wouldn't have gone Southwest's way, we're playing right now at 4 because they had to beat Southwest twice to get to state. Email is in. Good discussion. This from our friend Gary in Michigan. He asks the question, we have not heard from Connor in a while on the whole Northwestern situation.
Connor said this before the show.
I knew this was going to happen.
No, it's all right. This is from Gary. He said, hey, Chris, do you think Barnett would be a one-year candidate at Northwestern to hold down the fort for this season only as head coach? They've got Braun. They're going to go with Braun. And he's a North Dakota State guy. They're a hell of a good football program where he's come from. We'll see, because he was just recently hired. So I don't think Barney's getting any phone calls from the Northwestern president.
I doubt it.
Not based on the tenor of our interview with him Thursday.
Right.
So, but you tell me this. I would pull a Barry Alvarez with him if he's open to it. The guy hasn't coached for a while, but it's not like he can't coach and he's built it once. I don't think he'd take it. I don't think it's even in play, but I appreciate the question, Gary.
Yeah.
And I asked that, or Greg, not Gary. Greg emails us from Michigan. No, there's options for that, but I think let's see how Braun shakes out, and then let's see where Northwestern's at.
Right. Well, because even if you do give either of those two guys a phone call for a year or two, I mean, how much different is that going to be than the situation you have right now, coaching staff-wise, right?
It's still interim.
Yeah, like they have to face the music. It's not going to be a good year at Northwestern. It's not going to be a good 5 years probably at Northwestern. That's the fact of the reality, right? It's already hard enough to win there. Now you have this whole thing going on, and you got to trust a guy because you really don't have another choice that has never coached a Big Ten football. Granted, he's coached some really, really good teams at North Dakota State, but that's also not Big Ten football. So either way, it's just not a winning situation. It's going to be really hard to convince somebody to try and go take that job, especially after how this is blown up.
I think the paycheck, the one of two have conferences. I mean, there's guys that are clamoring to get the gig. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how long you keep the gig.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a Big Ten gig where you use it to maybe get higher, right? I mean, it's still a Big Ten gig at the end of the day. And
any loyalty of Northwestern built an ascension in yesteryears gone.
Yeah, and for me
too. So now you're renting, hopefully to own a good coach. And I think you made a good hire as a coordinator, but is the guy ready to be a head coach in the Big Ten?
Yeah, and that's the question. And for me, it's hard to see a guy leading a program like that, like Fitz did for 17 years, right? Because not only was he a good coach, he had the pride in Northwestern. He played there. He's one of the best athletes ever.
It was sentimental to him.
Yeah, like he cared about that more than, I don't want to say everybody, but he cared about it more than everybody, right? So
he had a special bond with it.
Guys, before we get out here this hour, Pete's on the line. He's got a thought on the hypothetical with the baseball situation.
Pete, shoot, buddy. Go ahead.
How you doing?
Good, man.
I guess in baseball, I've watched some. I'm not no expert by any means, but I always hated it when they walked people and loaded the bases. One pitch of hitting the batter and the game's over. Mm-hmm. And I think you just give the other team momentum. And you put more pressure on the pitcher, I guess is my thought.
It zapped any momentum, 1,000%. No, you nailed it.
And as far as Northwestern, I really think Fitzgerald got kind of screwed on this deal. You know, I had two kids, and I didn't know what they were doing 100% of the time. I don't know how a coach can take 105, 110 kids and know exactly what they're doing all the time. I think he was very loyal, very good coach. He really maintained that program and built on that program. I just couldn't see him getting fired over something he didn't even know.
Pete, appreciate the call, bud.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Coming up, Charlie McBride, a Monday with Charlie. About 25 minutes from now, Jay Moore, Blackshirt Husker NFLer. Jay Moore will join us. Thoughts on Taumua committing to Nebraska and some of Jay's teammates that came from the island. So we'll talk with Jaybird on that. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark, Hail Varsity Radio, Chris at HailVarsity.com. Can also get involved on the StreamYard, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Want to watch the show and interact that way? Real easy. Just go to the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, subscribe to that. Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio, KFOR, Facebook, and Twitter also. And then where you hear us around the state. So let's talk legacy. I love these discussions. You have hot seats and legacies and hot seats. And dare I say, the Nick Saban legacy is under attack. Not really, but kinda, in a sense that the SEC has outgrown Alabama. LSU, Tennessee, both beat Alabama. Bama would go years. They were like the 90s Huskers. You wouldn't lose in conference play. I think Nebraska went, it was some ungodly number. They went from 93 through 98. Their first conference loss since 1992. Here's the span for Nebraska between conference losses. It was Iowa State 92. Jimmy Walden will tell you about that ball game. There's a great picture of Jim Walden, our dear friend, on his knees praying with the official, telling the official to get the clock going quicker. Run that thing faster, son. And then their first loss was a comeback that almost forced overtime at Texas A&M, 1998. Think about that. 92 through 98, no conference loss for Nebraska. Unbeaten 93, 94, 95, 96 until the Big 12 championship game. And then you reel off an unbeaten year in 97. So impressive. You lost at A&M. You lost to Texas at home. You survived Okie State. So sometimes the league actually gets better in the midst of a dynasty. You're either forced to adapt or die. And LSU's always been knocking on that door. They get the right quarterback and the right coach. LSU's got loads of talent. Tennessee is back from the dead. Probation and all, they're okay. There's no more Spurrier at South Carolina, but Beamer seems to be getting things righted. They're pretty decent. You have the Lane train down at Ole Miss, so they're going to be fighting for skill talent for sure. And then you have your old trusty assistant named Kirby that's at Georgia. You had it's like the movie Twins. Apparently the bad twin was Jeremy Pruitt in his time at Tennessee. The good twin that took all of the Bama playbook, literally and figuratively in recruiting, from Tuscaloosa as the defensive coordinator, took it with him to Georgia. Georgia's always had players. They just didn't always have urgency. Well, Kirby has brought that Saban urgency. I say all that to say this with Nick Saban. Are you guys in that feel or mindset that it's slipping from Bama? I don't think they're a non-contender at all. I think there's been a lot of things that they have survived better than anybody in college football. The loss of coordinators, the loss of assistants, guys going early to the NFL, the transfer portal, the attrition. They lose 4- and 5-star talent. They lose more than most people get, and they've still been great. They found a way to have 3 first-round guys stick around at quarterback. Hurts eventually left, but he was still there in case of emergency. They over-recruited the guy that finished in the Heisman running 3 times to number 2. So that's where they're at. I think he's either whispered into Paul Finebaum's ear and said, you know what would be really cool is if you call me and our team out this year. Or maybe there is just some real thought that Kirby Smart and Georgia are that good, that loaded, that deep, that they three-peat. But God, I mean, that's where Bama's still at. So I say no, his legacy's still bulletproof because the expectation is to win the SEC and win it all. Mm-hmm. And the minute you don't pick them or think they have a shot at it, that's when they've hit a bit of a down arrow.
And let's talk about another legacy here real quick, just to compare it back to Saban. Let's look at Osborne. Mm-hmm. from 1984 up until the national championship year in 1994, 10 years, with the one exception being 93, Nebraska had 2 losses every single season.
Usually to Oklahoma or Miami,
and you know
or,
what years
Florida State.
We don't talk about whenever we talk about Osborne's legacy? Those seasons. You remember the national championship seasons. You remember how dominant those teams were through the mid-90s. That doesn't seem to factor into Osborne's discussion at all, and I'm not saying that those are bad years by any means, but they were down when compared to what you remember Osborne for being. This incredible team that, you know what, they might have lost in the bowl game every single year, but that was about it. Nobody else in the Big 10 in the Big 12, held a flame to them, held a candle to them. There was down years, quote unquote, for Osborne. That's the same we're talking about here with Bama. It's not like Bama is a team that's getting run over in the SEC right now. They're losing 1 or 2 games a year, and they're not making the
by
playoff.
Like 3 points.
And we're screaming, oh, no, it's the end for Nick Saban. No, this is still Nick Saban we're talking about here. That's still Tom Osborne we're talking about here. Those teams were still great.
They lost to really good teams on the road.
Yes.
Where you want to talk bullseye, fellas? The bullseye is still Bama. Georgia, too.
Yes.
But the bullseye is still, it is the Super Bowl anytime they roll into your town or they host you.
Yep.
And for them to lose a shootout like they did to Tennessee and to lose a shootout like they did to LSU, I mean, no one. Both those goalposts are still in witness protection. All right,
still at the bottom of the Tennessee River.
They are. So that's it. They also won a tie ball game against Texas. I mean, that was a kind of a grow up team that and you know what was funny? It's like they kind of flipped the switch and said game on in that Sugar Bowl. Remember when Kansas State was still like thinking they had a shot? It was 10-10. And then a nuke dropped and Bama's up 58 to whatever it was. I mean, they're still it. They are still it. Do you find it laughable? But the legacy question is there. We'll talk to Coach McBride about that because he's close with Nick Saban. But you want to get everybody back into focus or get them to grow up quick or realize what there is in front of them. Factor in some doubt. Have some doubt. Lead off SEC Media Days. You've got a whole week of this. And the talking point on day one is Nick Saban and his legacy. And it's been murmuring a little bit. But you know what? If he goes 9-3 this year, you're so, what's wrong with Nick? For him to do it as long as they have, every other year, go back to back, it's incredible. And he's still going. Like the guy does not want to not keep coaching. This is what he loves. This is what he's about.
It's still surprising when they lose games.
I mean, it is. And they're still favored over the other 3 playoff teams a lot of times, or at least 2 of them that make the college football playoff.
As long as that's happening, as far as I'm concerned, nothing is wrong with Nick Saban and or Alabama. I mean, nothing.
And one thing to note here, and I know we have Chris on the line. Chris,
Chris to hang.
Yeah, Chris, we have to hang until the next segment. But one thing to note here, there's a compilation on YouTube. Every single loss the Nick Saban era from 2007 to 2022. It's got over 1 million views. I've watched it. The first 8 minutes of the video are all the first 2 years of Bama.
Sure.
You get everything else covered in about 15 minutes.
Yep.
You do. And it's all, you know what made him shift from the son don't fumble the ball game manager is Cam Newton and Johnny Football. Hey, I want a mobile quarterback too.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this first hour. Always get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Easy to do. Hail Varsity Radio, the full show or the segments you want to hear. And always the stream. Get the video portion on Hail Varsity YouTube. You want to get hooked up with just great content. Always the press conferences or the interviews you want to see or hear. And just all sorts. We're not just talking football, but basketball, baseball, women's basketball. I mean, it's all there. Great coverage and video work by your friends at Hail Varsity.
And how about this? I have heard rumblings. If you're a person who likes press conferences, and I'm sure Schmidty's going to be down there covering, I'm going to be here in the studio cutting them all up, making sure we bring you all the coverage here on Hail Varsity Radio. I've heard rumblings, potentially 4 different media sessions in a week this year for Husker football. They're going to potentially run Monday through Thursday, every single day, having different media availability. So might be a great year for content for those of you sitting at home and for us here in the studio. So we're going to have plenty to talk about this fall. That's just rumblings right now. Don't have that officially confirmed. That is what I've been hearing, that they might be running 4 media sessions a week.
Both coordinators, the head man. That's pretty awesome.
Players and then
special teams.
Yep.
Big. We're a week from tomorrow. I flap my wings and I head out to, I'm flying Omaha to Detroit to Indy. And we will hunker down. We'll be live in the morning, all day, and afternoon at Lucas Oil Field. Hail Varsity Radio Roadshow at Lucas Oil for Big Ten Media Days next Wednesday, next Thursday. Thursday is Nebraska Day, so be sure you tune in. We'll have video capability, and we'll no doubt scare Joel Klatt and Coach Alvarez so they join us as they're kind of side-eyeing. It's like they're a hostage. But no, good dudes, and always love catching up with them there, and we'll grab all the players and coaches we can. So, should be fun. Reminder to get buckled up. 1 of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. And so you look at this legacy question of Saban. It's it's interesting, but and our old buddy Lars Anderson has talked about that. He's done a book with Saban. He's close with St. Nick, and Saban has his method to his madness, and that is what gets out in the media is direct words, either at him at the podium losing his mind, or him not even playing the victim, but just playing the us against the world card, the doubt. And that gets you right in focus immediately. And you go, there's so many different cards in that deck, but you can go with the disrespect card, you can go with the doubt card, you can go with the no one loves us, and you can use that to a point, but eventually you got to get beyond that. You can also go with the dark horse / surprise card, and that'll be a talking point next week with Nebraska.
Is the doubt, though, only to a point? Because it does feel like every single offseason we have this conversation. I mean, for the past 5 years, a couple years ago, Chris called in and he had to hang up. He had other things to do, but it was, has Dabo Sweeney overtaken Saban? And then we learned, well, no, Nick Saban's still keeping going. Now, Kirby Smart, is he out overtaken Saban? Like, all these questions come out just about every single offseason, and Nick Saban just uses it as fuel for his fire.
There's recency to deal with. There's recency with Dabo and the great trilogy of Clemson, Bama. There's recency with Kirby working on a third straight. So, yeah, recently, it's been Georgia, but Bama still has the scoreboard.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity Radio. It's Hour 2. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. We say hi to Mr. Blackshirt, Charlie McBride, a Monday with Charlie. Coach, it's been a while. How we doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. The weather's great. Everything's good. Got family a little bit. Some are left, but having a good time, just relaxing and being nice.
Well, I'm being nice, says Coach.
I haven't said anything bad today yet.
Well, look at you, and we got 20 minutes with you, and don't start now is my hope. But no, it looks like you had some family in, and you had the old boat fired up this weekend.
Yeah, I was one of my close buddies called last night. I don't know if you remember Mike Murray.
Right, yeah.
Like, he calls to check in to see if I'm still alive.
By the way, do you have gas in your boat? Do you want some, right? And let's take the boat out. I like it. Well, it's been an interesting week. We're getting close to heading off to Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days next week. So I want to get your thoughts on Preston Taumua. He's the Hawaiian offensive lineman, Coach McBride, that Nebraska got a commitment from last night, and looks like Nebraska's put together a pretty good offensive line class. Tell us how much of a priority, or just the idea to go to the Hawaiian Islands? How much emphasis was on it for Nebraska?
I'll tell you what, you know, when you're from at Nebraska, you go wherever. You can't. But I think, you know, that my experience has been a strong plus with Hawaiian people and kids that have played for us all along the road. We had a couple at Wisconsin, but we had probably a quarter of our team at Arizona State was from Hawaii. We had a coach named Bill Kachikawa who did a lot of recruiting out there and was well known, and he did a tremendous job. And so, you know, my feelings about this is these kids are tough, they're smart, and they really know what's how to play the game, because it's the toughness part of it is there, and that's how you play the game. And I think it starts there, and you know you're going to get a kid that really works hard. If he was rated high, and you can't, you know, you can always say, well, we don't know about this kid yet, but you know, if you're rated as high as he was, somebody knows about him. I'll guarantee you that. And usually, you know, all those kind of kids in high school that are rated like that turn out to be really, really good players. Finoti was a great player. I mean, when he was here, he was a man. And you know, so there's been a lot of other kids, you know, Rayola, and a lot of the guys have proven themselves, and I think that reputation is probably part of his decision.
Coach, you guys were in it till the end with Haloti Ngata. He first round pick out of Oregon. This was probably 2001. I think he was that draft class, or maybe a year after. Went to Baltimore forever, but right. You guys were right there to land him as a 3 technique, and I think he ended up at Oregon. But that's another Hawaiian that almost came to Nebraska. But you're right with Finoti and Raiola. There's some other guys that were in the front 7 or on the line of scrimmage too that gave a lot of good snaps for Nebraska over the years.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that had something to do with a lot. Even some of the kids that didn't come here have a reputation of knowing Nebraska was really a great place because we were in, part of their decision. And so a lot of times, you know, kids look at it that way and say, hey, look at all the guys that, you know, they didn't go there, but they were the second choice. And part of it was it was closer to home, or which made the decision not which school was better, but it was distance a lot of times. So you never know what brought them to, you know, making their final decision. You know, when you pick a school like Nebraska and you're from Hawaii, you know, it's got to really mean something to you that you came here. I mean, it means something to the whole university in a lot of respects. A player or a person, even from Hawaii, you know, it doesn't have to be a football player. It could be a student. It could be anything. And, you know, it's kind of a win situation.
It's Charlie McBride with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Charlie, a lot of people around have been watching the quarterback documentary on Netflix, and that's been one of the storylines is Marcus Mariota. He goes up to the Pacific Northwest to play at Seattle in week 2, I believe, of their season, week 3 of their season, I should say. And he talks about how it feels like home, and he does feel homesick for places like the Pacific Northwest and Hawaii. And I want to get your thoughts. How do you make a kid from Hawaii, which is just so culturally different than Nebraska, feel at home among all the corn and the cows that you'll get here in this state? It doesn't quite feel like it would be a match, yet there's been that pipeline to Hawaii in the past. How do you make a Hawaii kid feel at home in Nebraska?
Well, I don't know about the culture part of it, because I think that part of the world's changing. I think people don't look at that as much as they used to. I remember fathers telling me, if you don't have enough minority coaches on your staff, or you don't have enough of this and that, I don't hear that stuff anymore, and I never heard it toward the end of my coaching career. It was you could feel it changing, and then players were picking places because of where they felt like it was the best for them, whether it was academics, whether it was weight training, or whatever the case was, or the football team for that matter. But when they added all the things up, what is the best thing for me? And I think that's where a lot of kids are going now. I know that there's other things that, there's money, there's all these strange things that are appearing all of a sudden. But, I think when it comes right down to it, I think a person, he could be getting a lot of money, but if he doesn't want to go there, he's not going to go. And, but I think that to me is, the culture part of it, I think, is starting to disappear.
Coach Charlie McBride is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And, Coach, when you talk about an offensive lineman such as Preston coming out of Hawaii, and we talked about this earlier, but his size, he's 6'4". How much stock do you put into somebody's size on the offensive line, rather than, does that totally outweigh the fundamentals that they come with, or is size, I don't want to say is an afterthought when it comes to analyzing offensive linemen, but is that the first thing you look at?
Well, I think the first thing you look at is, when you really get into it, the first thing you look at is, does he qualify? Is he there to a point where, it's not going to be a struggle? But I think, when you're talking about height, weight, I'll tell you what, if you take a guy 6'2", okay, and let's take a guy 6'4", take your fingers and make 2 inches. Mm-hmm. You tell me, does that make the difference in a football player? I promise you it doesn't. I'll promise you. And if a kid is 6'7" and he can play, there's a lot of guys that are great athletes. I think it goes a little bit to their background. Did they wrestle? What kind of sports were they in other than football? A lot of kids, you'll find out, nowadays we're in soccer, which is really, it's a good thing for offensive linemen. I could go into a story with it, but it'd take too long. But right now, I'll say something. I wish they had a game for big linemen where you couldn't wear your shoes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think I know where you're going, and some of the kids that either you've recruited or knew were recruited, they'd play soccer barefoot, and it made their feet so tough they didn't have foot injuries, correct?
Right. You have to use, I learned this a little while ago. A guy from Nigeria was working on his doctorate and talking about the first thing he said, well, your young people, when they're born, the first thing you want to do is put a pair of shoes on them. And the muscle structure is not going to be the same. Mm-hmm. And the protection of the joints, the ankles, the knee, and all those things, you'll find out that if you take all of them put together and take those kids that don't wear shoes and things like that and learn how to change direction, and use their toes and use all the different muscle groups you have, more so than a person with shoes on. And, that sounds stupid, but it really isn't stupid. And I've always said his point was he was going to Florida State to get his doctorate, and he told me he was going to try to put something in the program for bigger people. You could work on the whole team, but it was strictly for bigger people because he thought he could get results faster.
That makes a lot of sense, and not have those nagging foot injuries.
How about this? Firewalking. Where they put all the hot coals out?
Yeah, I'll let you do it, man. Coach, you ever been firewalking in Hawaii?
No, but I had some fire walking here when I fell on the fire burning leaves. I fell in.
Yeah, I remember that. You were telling us about that.
Well, I got up fast, and I got a little burn on my knee, but that's probably about it. But it was exciting.
You just rubbed some dirt on it, didn't you?
Made the knee stronger, I'll tell you what.
Coach,
one thing, I had about 2 seconds to think about it when I hit the fire. I said, it's kind of warm down.
Charlie McBride's with us. Coach, I want to ask you before we say goodbye about your dear friend Nick Saban. What do you think about some of the narrative coming out of SEC media days that Coach Saban's legacy is on the line this season?
Well, I know Nick well enough. He's going to say what he thinks. Nick's not afraid of anybody. I mean, he's not afraid to say what he, I've known him for a long time. I've known him when he's been on the losing end of things and stuff like that. And Nick will say what he believes. Mm-hmm. And he will not say something that he's just trying to blow smoke. Mm-hmm. And, that thing. The one thing interesting, aside from that, if you watch Nick Saban speak, he speaks with his hands. He's never stopped his hands. He's a guy that, a lot of people just talk. Mm-hmm. He talks, but his hands and arms are moving all the time. And when he's telling what he really feels.
That's a tell. Well, I'm looking at Bama, and they had a couple of losses, and they missed the playoff last year, but they're still pretty loaded. We got into the conference run you guys had where it was between 1992 and 1998 before you lost. You went that long without losing a conference game.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I looked at it so much different than I think a lot of coaches do. I was a week-to-week guy, and as soon as the game was over by about Monday or Tuesday, I probably couldn't tell you what the score was of the week before.
You focused, yeah.
You just have. My thinking was don't let the players down. Mm-hmm. Be prepared the best you can be, and that to me was the most important thing is the preparation of the stuff. And when you go back to Nick, that's one of the things that I'll guarantee you what. His guys will be prepared. They may not be the best, mm-hmm. but I always look at it this way. If you play as a group, you may not be the best, but if you play well as a group, you'll be the best.
Makes sense. Charlie McBride's with us, a Monday with Charlie. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, we'll say goodbye, and we'll holler at you next Monday before we head to Indy. How's that sound?
Oh, that'll be a blast. Those things used to be wild. Those guys that are coming, they get away from home and they're crazy, those press guys.
I promise you, I promise the room here, I will be in bed by 9 o'clock.
Okay. We'll have a good time anyway. I mean, yeah. But I'll talk to you.
All right, Coach. You take care. Appreciate you.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Bye now.
There he is, Charlie McBride, a Monday with Charlie. It's Hail Varsity Radio. You caught part of that or you want to hear it again, the podcast, always there for you. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and we love our Mondays with Charlie, Mr. Blackshirt. The old media days were a crazy party. I may tell a story about my first media day, the old Big 12 media days, and who liked Bud Heavy. We'll tell you that before 6.
All-State, 2-year starter, and rush in for the Big Red and NFL vet.
Is Dudeness or Duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
It's Blackshirt Jay Moore with Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it, it's Hail Varsity Radio. The Blackshirt Hour continues. Black Shirt Husker NFLer Jay Moore joins us, co-host Big Red Wrap-Up. Find him on Twitter at JMoore44. I got to give Jay credit and thanks. Saw him at the 4th of July. His dad found my sunglasses when I went down the slide at the Jay Moore Resort, and Jay did not make me go put a shirt on, although he was thinking about it. Bird, good to see you.
You too. Yeah, I'm glad I was able to run into you. That was a very busy place on the 4th of July.
It was. Beer was cold, though. It was good. It was good.
Always is there. It's one of my favorite spots. Any place that serves cold beer, usually, but I don't shy away from.
No, I like it. Well, there's cold beer in Hawaii, and there may be a cold beer on the third floor of Memorial Stadium about 2 a.m. last night. Don't know, but Preston Taumua commits, and interior lineman can play outside as well, but 6'4", 315. Jay, this kid's a top 200 recruit, number one player in Hawaii, and it's not just lip service. I mean, there was a committable offer for him to Alabama. There's a committable offer for him to Auburn, and Oregon's had a really good run, even post Cristobal, on getting offensive linemen here. What do you think of the pickup for Nebraska and Raiola?
Yeah, big time. I've seen a few, camp pics of him. Obviously not in pads, but still doing one-on-one pass rush. And the kid is very polished at a young age. Very, very, very good technique. I don't know who his coaches are over in Hawaii, but they have done a fantastic job with him getting, Division I football ready. Great feet, great hands. And again, I know they're still doing pass rush with no pads, but you can just kind of see guys who they can just move, man. That's just God-given talent to where they're able to have good hands and feet, and they can punch. That's kind of the main three ingredients you want from a really good offensive lineman from a pass pro perspective. And I saw that just in a couple clips, on social media here in the last couple of weeks when his commitment date was getting close. So obviously, supremely excited to get an offensive lineman like that. Those type of recruits and those type of commitments, those make me happy, because that's going to get us back on track. Getting defensive linemen, offensive linemen that are very high caliber. You're going to battle with the Alabamas, the Georgias, the top schools in the SECs. That's big time. That's a great get, and great get for Coach Rule, Coach Raiola. Obviously, having the Hawaii connection there with Raiola I'm sure that paid some dividends there over the long term. But we're moving in the right direction with recruiting and building this thing back to where it needs to get.
Jay Moore is with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Jay, whenever you look at a 6'4" offensive lineman, some recruiting services have him listed as an interior guy. Other services have him listed at his high school position, which has an offensive tackle. I'm partial to think that the guy's got enough technique that he can overcome some of that small stature in order to be an offensive tackle, even at the Big Ten level. But just generally, whenever you think of the smaller offensive linemen and smaller offensive tackles, do you think that hinders what they can do in college, or do you think that's more of a problem for the NFL?
I think what I saw, on tape, again, on my phone, on Twitter, I think, he was playing offensive tackle, and he looks the part. He didn't look small to me by any means. I think he can play that position in the Big Ten and at the Division I level. You start to try to, equate him to something that's in the NFL. I don't know. It's a little too early, but I think he's a good enough athlete. He could play both. I truly do. I know he's going to be small on the spectrum of what we've had for offensive tackles here in the last few years with, Ben Hart and, some of those guys are, 6'6", 6'7" type of players. I don't necessarily think you need to be that tall. I think you need to have long arms. You got to be a good athlete. That's the greatest thing. All offensive tackles are great athletes. Most of them started their careers in the high school level or even early in college as tight ends. I was in the same draft class as Joe Staley, who was just retired just a few years ago from the 49ers. And when he got to Central Michigan, he was a tight end, and he eventually moved to tackle. So I think you got to be a good athlete. So I think that's what I've seen he is. Whether he's going to play at guard, I don't know. I think he looks great at tackle. He could probably play both, and that's just going to make him that more valuable. When you have a good athletic offensive lineman, you can put him at a lot of different positions, and that's the beauty of of being a good athlete up front.
Jay Moore is with us on Hail Varsity Radio, and when it comes to analyzing offensive linemen, you mentioned Preston not going in the pads as much recently, but still doing one-on-ones straight up. I mean, what do you look for? You mentioned feet quickness and the footwork there. What specifics do you go into analyzing when you look at offensive linemen that don't have the pads on for drills?
Yeah, honestly, I think pass rushing, or from an offensive lineman standpoint, getting out of pads is probably, it shows their technique even better, because you can't be as aggressive. You can't grab as much. You can't, you can probably get a little loose in your technique when you have pads on. And I think just showing what you're able to do with pads off, it's feet and hands. And that's whether that's for offensive linemen and defensive linemen. All good defensive linemen play with great pad level. They have great footwork. They have great hands. And if one's not good, the other one can save it. If your hands are bad, usually your feet can save you. If your feet are bad, your hands can save. That goes to the same for offensive linemen. Pad level as well for offensive linemen. You can't play too high. You got to play low for the most part. But in the clips I saw in my pass pro, he looks very, very polished. He does not look raw at all. He looks like he's been coached very, very well. He has a good understanding of how he's been developed and what they want. And I was supremely, like I said, I was impressed with everything I've seen just from the little bit of the few clips I saw. So, looking at him, you got a whole another year to go here, but I wouldn't be surprised if this kid is pushing for playing time day one when he gets to Nebraska. A year from now in 2024 when he's finally on campus.
Jay Moore is with us, Black Shirt Husker NFLer, Hail Varsity Radio. At a ball game, so I am hunkered down here at Hartog. Jay in his office, Elijah, Connor back in studio. Jay, you had a chance to cross paths with some of the kind of the Hawaiian connection. I always smile when I think of Coach Darlington heading out to the islands, and Uncle George has about 50 Hawaiian shirts from all the trips he made across the Pacific. That said, he came home with some dudes, specifically Dominic and Tony Finotti, Tony Tata. Waldrop was started, 2-3 years. So Nebraska at one point in time nailed Hawaii and got the best there was on the lines of scrimmage from Hawaii. And they were always kind of in the hunt for the Polynesian kids as well. Haloti Nata ended up going to Utah. Mania Brown. I mean, there's some dudes that were really high-level football players. What do you remember about some of the guys that either you knew of or even maybe played with, college or NFL, from the islands?
Yeah, I was actually when I went on my official visit to Nebraska, Haloti was on that trip.
Oh, okay.
I think he was originally from. I think he went to high school. I know it's whether it's Tongan or Samoan, right. I know he graduated from high school in Salt Lake City. He went to high school with Stu Bradley. He went to Highland High there. But here's the thing about Tongans and the Hawaiians and the Tonga Samoa, whatever background they come from. They are some of the most kindest, gentlest human beings you'll ever meet. But they also are some of the most freak of nature athletes and just strongest. They're great people to be around, but they're awesome teammates. But they are stronger than hell, really good athletes. Trying to think, I was with the 49ers. Oh gosh, his name is Isaac Sopoaga. He played on the defensive line, and I think Isaac. I can't remember if he went to Hawaii or Utah. I know Utah has a strong. They recruit Hawaii very, very strong. But again, one of the nicest guys you'll ever be around, and could just throw up 150-pound dumbbells like they were 25-pound dumbbells. Could throw a football damn near 70 yards in the air. Really good feet, really good athlete, just strong, could run. I've been around a lot of them, and they all are just great human beings. They're super. They're great football players because they possess all the great natural God-given talents that you need to be a very high level, talented player. So I've had the pleasure to be around a few. And I know Tonio just got left before I got there. I was there with a few other guys in Nebraska, but I tell you what, Isaac Sopoaga, I think the Athletic did an article on him like a year or two ago, just about how big a freak of nature he was.
Oh wow!
And so they're fun to be around, man. They're great teammates, and I love it when you get to play next to them on defensive linemen because they make you much better because they're so good up front.
Jay Moore is with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Jay, when you get back to Nebraska's offensive line recruiting class, how much are you going to be watching for with the offensive line this season to be able to see like how much development time these incoming freshmen are going to have? Because the offensive line, obviously, after last season is going to be a big question mark in this upcoming season. And I think a lot of fans are looking at these incoming guys saying these guys are the future. But realistically, how important is it that this offensive line that Nebraska currently has is able to put something together to give them some development time?
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't think it's ever – I just mentioned about the kid who just committed. I could see, he's that good. I could see him playing as a true freshman, but hopefully he doesn't have to. It'd be nice if he could sit in redshirt and get that much better, get that much stronger. Put on 20, 25 pounds, but you want it. That's a place where you want to get old. You want to be old up front, and that's what Nebraska did for many, many years. It was rare that you saw a guy played as early as a sophomore. Usually you didn't start playing until you were darn near a junior or senior. Now you had some guys come through who were young. Like Zach Wiegert, I know played very, very early in his career. But most of the time guys didn't play till they were juniors and seniors because that's just how it went. And that's what they wanted. You kind of had to earn your stripes and through scout team and playing with the 2s and 3s and stuff like that and being developed. So I wouldn't hate if that's the way it is, but I tell you what, if a kid comes in, he's that good, and you got to play him, then you're going to play him because you got to play the best guys you have in your roster at whatever given time they step foot on campus. So, but the depth needs to be developed better. It's going to be interesting to see how this first year goes with Satterfield and Rule in this offense. Hopefully, guys stay healthy. We've had issues in the past. Obviously, Teddy's been banged up. We've had to play some guys out of position. Move some guys around. So hopefully this year guys stay healthy and we can develop those young guys behind them. And they're not forced to play at an early age because sometimes their confidence is a very fragile thing. And if you get exposed early in your career, you can kind of get beat down a little bit. And that affects a lot of people along the offensive line. So hopefully everyone stays healthy. We're able to develop and, we're playing kids as, sophomore, juniors, and seniors instead of redshirt freshmen.
Well, when you talk about recruiting, Jay, and getting these higher touted guys out of high school, and if that trend continues, right, with Rule, I mean, you're going to see probably, at least on paper, more of those younger guys getting in. If that is the case, I mean, you could still develop on the field. Would you rather have, the highly touted recruiting class coming in and getting in right away, or still having them kind of pay their dues, if you will, in the first couple of years, letting the more experienced guys get in?
Yeah, it's kind of 6-1 way, half a dozen the other. Like I said, if they're that good, you got to play them. But today's day of college football, and I think I don't know how it's going to go the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but just with the transfer portal, we're able to snag guys from Arizona State and Georgia that are going to come in, and Ben Scott's going to be able to play. He's going to be our starting center coming in. So it's interesting because if there is a gap, you can go snag a guy from a Division I top tier program. But like I said, offensive linemen, defensive linemen are like gold in the transfer portal, so they are so hard to snag and grab. Everybody wants them because they're that important. They are the most important. Those are the two most important positions on your field year in, year out. So if they're good, you play them early, you can do that. If they need to be developed, hopefully you have the depth and you don't have to throw them in there early on and play them. So like I said, there's a fine line in how this game's evolved here in the last 3-4 years. The transfer portal, you can get guys, you kind of plug and play them. And then hopefully your young guys you bring in can sit and get those reps. If halfway down the year, if some injuries, hopefully they got some confidence and they refine their skills a little bit even more, and you can plug them in and play, and you can trust them. But if not, hopefully you have the development behind them. You've done it the right way through practice. You've done it the right way through recruiting. You've done it the right way through the weight room. You've done it the right way through meeting rooms. that you have this process, and hopefully they've obviously defined this process, but stick with that process as well and not constantly change it, because if you're always changing your process and you really don't have a process. So I'm excited to see that process, come before us here this year and see these guys kind of develop and get to work.
Schmidty, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Jay, let's get your thoughts on SEC Media Days, day one. And Finebaum's at it again, man. Saban legacy. Is it on the line this season? The guy has not won a championship, bless his heart, since the COVID season. He's been in the playoff, didn't go to the playoff last year. Every kid who comes in and stays 4 years has won a championship. But let's ask about his legacy. Mm-hmm. He either gets back to the playoff and wins another one, or his assistant that was with him for 8 years goes and wins a third in a row. Either way, his legacy's fine. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. Nick Saban's go down as one of the greatest football coaches of all time in college football, without a doubt. If there was a Mount Rushmore, you'd have to put him on there, right up there with T.O. and maybe like a Bo Schembechler. I don't know. That's another conversation we can have for another time. But yes, his legacy is not diminished. It's Finebaum just trying to that's ESPN and Finebaum and clickbait world. It's trying to get some views, trying to stir the pot up. I mean, that's there's not a whole lot to talk about other than the dumpster fire over at Northwestern's going through, but so far this off season. So there's got to be something you got to chit chat about, and trying to summon up the courage to say that Saban's legacy could be diminished if he doesn't reach the playoff or wins another championship. I mean, come on, give me a break. That Alabama's just been it's legitimately been Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and now Georgia. I mean, those have been the 4 teams that have been competitive in the last 10 years. Since would Saban get there in 2007?
Yeah,
2008 was his first year. I can't. But for 16, 17 years, the guy has. It's been Alabama. It's been one of the greatest runs in college football history in the last 16, 17 years. Again, it's comparable to Nebraska, and from the 80s and 90s. It's funny. It's just Finebaum being Finebaum. He's gonna, he's just gonna find something to ruffle people's feathers. And hey, it's works. He's got us talking about it. But I'm sure Saban will get a hold of him and give him something. I don't think Saban needs any more firepower, but Finebaum just gave him some more firepower to get this thing going. Who's going to be even more pissed is those players of Alabama. Like, uh-oh. They already go through the grinders. Nick's going to be extra pissed now. Coach Saban's going to be extra pissed. That fall camp's going to get that much tougher because he wants to prove Finebaum wrong.
Jay, you made the comparison between Nebraska and their dominance in the 90s to Alabama and what they've been for the past 15 years or so. And I want to get your thoughts. Saban's probably nearing the end of his career. We don't know how much longer he's going to go, but he strikes me as a guy who's going to want to go out on top. So you wonder if he's going to be searching for that final or maybe final 2 national championships. And I want to get your thoughts. Tougher act to follow, Osborne at Nebraska or Nick Saban at Alabama?
Oh, boy. That's a tough one. I don't know. Following T.O. is tough. And obviously, I'm biased, supremely biased. Following T.O. But the funny thing is T.O. was only 60 years old and retired. And Saban's Saban in his 70s yet?
72.
Yeah. So it's just I know he T.O. had his promise to Frank, and that's why he had to make the move to when he did, but. I think following up T.O. that's a tough act to follow. Just, literally from 1978 till 1997, for 19 years, they were it. They were the it program. They were there every year. Whether it's the Big Eights, Orange Bowls, battle with Oklahomas and Florida States and Miamis, and every year. I know he coached. But well before 78, but that's kind of like when they finally beat Oklahoma and,
Sure.
kind of got the monkey off of their back. but it's going to be a tough act to follow whenever Saban calls it quits. I'm sure they're grooming some guys, and Alabama has more money than they know what to do with. They're going to be able to go pull some very good coaches, and whether that's either Dabo from Clemson, Sally Dabo's an Alabama guy, or whoever it may be, they can pay a lot of money to make sure that this Alabama train keeps rolling along.
Jay, we'll say goodbye, and thanks for talking some ball with us, bud. Always appreciate you giving us a few minutes, man.
Yeah, thanks for always having me, and have fun at the baseball game. We'll chat with you guys next week.
Good to spend time with Jay Moore. Talked to him a little while ago while the drama was still thick. And you heard it in the stands there. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. A Monday edition, Hail Varsity Radio. Big show tomorrow. Excited. We'll have Matt Schick with us live from Bristol. So Mr. Schick from Schick and Nick at ESPN and Sirius XM going to join us. George Darlington, longtime Nebraska assistant, really hit a ton of pay dirt in Hawaii. So excited to get his perspective on recruiting the islands. And yes, Mitch Sherman back from the Ozarks. We will prod and pry into Mitch about whether or not he got to spend time with Marty Bird. And we'll say goodbye in a moment. Monday edition winding down. Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, Hail Varsity, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. If we're keeping track, Connor winning the over-under bet on when I get to the station in studio from baseball. The A5 JV district title game goes to Southwest over East, and what a ball game, extra innings, all 9 innings. Was pretty awesome, pretty entertaining.
Schmidty, I've heard all these stories about how your son has the same foot speed as you, so I assumed you had a heavy right foot and you'd get here a little bit quicker.
I'm nursing a speeding ticket on the way back from South Dakota.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
it was also 4 o'clock when he drove over here. I feel like that's pretty high traffic.
As I left, you're like, dude, just take 70th to Havelock.
Yeah.
In Lincoln, and let's just say we got behind people who thought they were in a funeral procession.
Welcome to traffic in Lincoln.
And they weren't. It's all right. What's the lineup tonight? What are you guys doing? I'm not inviting myself to go with you before you both freak out. I'm just saying what's going on in the lives of two dudes, 2 young guys tonight. Summertime. You gonna fire the grill up? You gonna go see a movie? Are you going to the bars?
I need to find a time at some point to go watch this new Mission Impossible movie. My dad went and saw it on opening night, and he had good reviews for it. So I need to go find a time. But as I think I laid out last week, I took a roommate to the airport last week, and he's still out of town. I think he might be hurt if I went and watched the new Mission Impossible movie without him, so I might have to wait for him. So other than that, I think I'll probably do some meal prep for the week. I might have to fire up the old FIFA and continue on in my career mode. I've been trying to save Tottenham Hotspur, and I've been doing well so far. I need to do a little bit better in my Premier League results, but the winter transfer window is coming up, and I think I can make some moves there. I'm sure I'm boring all my listeners at home. So other than that, not much planned. Probably maybe might fire up a movie if I don't go with the FIFA route.
Are you going to continue making free fits T-shirts?
I will not. I haven't started, for the record. But I will not. I will be probably removing myself as far from that situation as possible, as much as I don't like it.
No, I know.
But I'll probably go home. Hence the Jersey. I'll go watch the Cubs play some pretty mediocre baseball at Wrigley. And then I think I'm going to go meet up with a friend who just got back from being overseas for about a month.
Wow.
On a mission trip
Cool.
downtown at probably McKinney's. No free shout-outs, but one of my favorite places in the Haymarket. So that's,
once you get them advertising, you can talk about them all the time.
I know. I'll have to go talk to a manager while I'm there tonight.
Hey, Connor Clark, remember me?
You know who I am.
Son, you have 7 unpaid bar tabs.
Are you even allowed to be in here? I mean,
and I have a great way to pay you for those bar tabs. How do you like free advertising?
Connor, you need to go to Rob's office.
I'll have it done in about 7 or 8 meetings.
God love you. No, I think we're some of the parents are going to go meet at a establishment and
no free shout-outs.
and enjoy. And then probably curse also the long drive to Bennington, but at least we're getting to drive to Bennington.
How far is that?
No great way to get there. You got to go through Omaha, head north. Great community. Fantastic athletic setup.
I'd call it probably a little over an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Okay.
Hour 20. And God love you sits.
For my own preparation, what days is that? Am I going to be filling in for you those days? I'll talk to you after the show.
No. Friday is first day of state, but I will just take my trusty travel equipment with me.
There you go.
That's why you're a pro.
Kyle Sitzman, God love you. He has rescued my headphones, and he will hand them off to Moats.
Nice.
Which is nice. Talk to you tomorrow at 4 on Hail Varsity. Thanks.